She walked away for a billionaire. So I took away the one person he never expected. Have you ever watched someone destroy your life while smiling across the dinner table? I never imagined betrayal would arrive with candlelight and expensive wine. The restaurant overlooked the harbor, where luxury yachts drifted beneath the evening skyline. Everything about the place screamed success. Polished marble floors, crystal glasses, waiters who moved like they were performing in a ballet. My wife, Rachel, had picked it. Looking back, that should have been my first warning. She always chose elegant restaurants whenever she had something difficult to say. Across from me, she kept twisting the stem of her wine glass instead of drinking from it. She was nervous. That alone unsettled me. Rachel wasn't the nervous type. She negotiated million-dollar marketing contracts without breaking a sweat. She could silence an entire boardroom with one sentence. Yet tonight, she couldn't even look me in the eye. "You're awfully quiet," she finally said. I smiled faintly while cutting into my steak. "Long week," she frowned. "It's only Tuesday." I know. She didn't laugh. Years ago, she would have. Back when we were two broke dreamers splitting tacos after work. I was an ambitious residential designer sketching houses on napkins. She believed every sketch would someday become reality. 7 years later, the dream had become mortgages, promotions, business dinners, and endless business trips. Somewhere along the way, we stopped building a future together. Instead, we simply occupied the same house. "I need to tell you something." There it was. The sentence every married person secretly fears. Most husbands would have panicked. I didn't, because I'd already known. For 24 days, I'd discovered everything by accident after returning early from a client meeting in Denver. Rachel had left her laptop unlocked on our kitchen island. A messaging app blinked on the screen. I wasn't snooping. I simply looked, and my entire marriage collapsed. The messages weren't subtle. "Last night was worth every risk. I can't stop thinking about you. Next time we'll stay somewhere nicer." The sender's name was only one letter. D. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I quietly took screenshots. Then I spent the next 3 weeks collecting every piece of evidence I could find. Hotel receipts, calendar inconsistencies, late-night meetings, credit card charges. By the time Rachel sat across from me in that restaurant, I already knew who D was, her CEO, David Calloway, one of the wealthiest executives in the city. "So," I said calmly, "what did you want to tell me?" She stared at her untouched dinner. "I've been seeing someone." "I know." Her head snapped upward. "You, what?" "I know." Silence. The noise from the restaurant seemed to disappear. "I wasn't planning to tell you like this," she whispered. "No? I wanted to explain." "Then explain." Tears filled her eyes. "It wasn't supposed to happen." "They never are." She swallowed hard. "It's David." I nodded once. "I know. You knew? For weeks." Her face turned pale. "You didn't say anything? What would it have changed?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Finally, she whispered, "I want a divorce." There it was. No hesitation, no apology, just a clean cut. Oddly enough, it didn't hurt the way I'd expected, because grief had already finished its work weeks earlier. Now there was only clarity. "Okay," I said. Rachel blinked. "Okay? You've already made your decision." "I thought you'd fight for us." I leaned back. "You already left this marriage. You just waited until tonight to tell me." She stared at me like she was talking to a stranger. Maybe she was, because the man sitting across from her wasn't the husband she'd grown used to. That version of me had disappeared the moment I read those messages. The waiter quietly placed the check on the table. I paid. One final dinner. One final act as husband and wife. Neither of us spoke during the drive home. When we pulled into the driveway, Rachel finally broke the silence. "I'll stay with my sister tonight." "I think that's best." She nodded, grabbed her overnight bag, and drove away. I watched her taillights disappear into the darkness. Then I walked inside. The house felt strangely peaceful. Not empty. Peaceful. I poured myself a glass of bourbon and opened the folder I'd been building for nearly a month. Photos. Receipts. Evidence. Enough to destroy reputations if I wanted. But as I looked through everything, I realized revenge wasn't what I actually wanted. Not revenge. Control. I opened my laptop. Instead of searching for divorce attorneys, I searched for someone else. Claire Calloway, David's wife. The woman he'd been betraying while stealing mine. And within 5 minutes, I realized something that changed everything. The plan begins. I clicked on Claire's profile, expecting another glamorous socialite living a perfect life. Instead, I found loneliness. Her social media wasn't filled with luxury vacations or flashy parties. It was museums, independent bookstores, historic homes, charity events. She smiled in every photo, but her eyes never did. It was a look I recognized immediately. The look of someone who had spent years pretending everything was fine. I dug deeper. Claire had once been one of the city's most respected museum curators before marrying David. Then, almost overnight, her career disappeared. Magazine interviews called it a personal decision. I knew better. Powerful men rarely ask. They simply make sacrifices sound romantic. I spent the next several days learning everything I could. Her favorite galleries, her volunteer work, the literary foundation she supported, even the small coffee shop she visited almost every Thursday morning after touring a local art exhibit. This wasn't stalking. It was research. Architects never begin construction without studying the foundation first. Neither would I. One evening, I discovered an online community for art lovers. Claire was an active member. She had posted about an upcoming modern art exhibition downtown. Anyone interested in visiting Friday evening? Art is always better when shared with people who actually slow down enough to see it. Perfect. I created an account. Nothing fake, just simple. Ethan Vertical Bar Residential Designer. My profile mentioned architecture, historic restoration, and a love for public art. Then I replied, architecture and painting have more in common than most people realize. Both create emotional spaces. I'd love to join if there's room. I hesitated for only a second before pressing post. 5 minutes later, a notification appeared. Absolutely. We're meeting at 6 o'clock. Looking forward to hearing your perspective. That was easier than I expected. Still, this wasn't about flirting. Not yet. My goal wasn't to steal another man's wife. It was something much more dangerous. I wanted her to remember who she had been before becoming David Calloway's wife. Friday arrived cold and windy. I dressed carefully. Dark jeans, navy sweater, leather jacket, nothing flashy. Confidence doesn't need designer labels. The gallery occupied an old brick warehouse that had been transformed into a bright, minimalist exhibition space. I arrived early. She walked in exactly at 6. Claire was even more striking in person. Not because she looked like a model, because she carried herself like someone who had once loved life and forgotten how. When our eyes met, she smiled politely. "Ethan?" I nodded. "And you must be Claire." Her handshake was warm, confident, not rehearsed. "I'm glad you came," she said. "So am I." The rest of the group slowly drifted through the exhibit, leaving us discussing paintings that neither of us pretended to fully understand. It turned out, we weren't really talking about art. We were talking about life, about purpose, about creating things that outlive us. Hours passed without either of us noticing. Eventually, we stood in front of a massive abstract painting filled with deep reds fading into black. Claire folded her arms. "I've always thought this painting looked like hope disappearing. I looked at it for a long moment. I see something different." "What?" "I think the light is fighting its way back." She turned toward me. "You're an optimist," I smiled. "No, I've just learned that darkness isn't always the ending." For several seconds, she simply looked at me, then quietly asked, "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Why did you really come tonight?" There it was, the question I knew would eventually come. I could have lied. Instead, I chose honesty. "My wife asked me for a divorce." Claire's expression softened. "I'm sorry. She fell in love with someone else." Silence. Then Claire looked back at the painting. "My husband is having an affair." The words came out almost as a whisper. I don't have proof, but deep down, I already know. Neither of us spoke. Sometimes silence says more than conversation ever could. Finally, I asked, Would you like to grab coffee? She smiled. For the first time that evening, it reached her eyes. I'd like that. As we walked out into the cold night together, I realized something unexpected. This wasn't unfolding the way I'd planned. I expected manipulation, strategy, carefully calculated revenge. Instead, I found someone carrying the exact same heartbreak I was. And for the first time in weeks, neither of us felt alone. A dangerous connection. The coffee shop Claire chose was hidden between an old bookstore and a family-owned bakery. It wasn't the kind of place wealthy executives ever visited, which probably explained why she loved it. This is my escape, she admitted as we settled into a quiet corner booth. David doesn't even know it exists. There was something painfully honest about the way she said his name. Not with anger, with exhaustion. We ordered coffee. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. Tell me something. What? When did you realize your marriage was over? I stared at the steam rising from my cup. Probably months before I admitted it. She nodded. I think that's how it happens. You don't wake up one morning and stop loving someone. You slowly become strangers living in the same house. She smiled sadly. I've been married for 12 years. I've never felt lonelier. Those words stayed with me because they sounded exactly like something I would have said. I used to curate museum exhibitions, Claire continued. I absolutely loved it. You still talk about it like you do. Her eyes brightened for the first time. I miss it every single day. What happened? She laughed quietly. David's company became successful, and suddenly I wasn't supposed to be a curator anymore. I became. She searched for the right word, an accessory. She looked down at her wedding ring. I traded my career for his image. That sentence hit harder than she realized. How many dreams had been quietly sacrificed so someone else's ambitions could grow? What about you? She asked. What did you give up? My own ambitions, she frowned. I spent years making myself smaller because I thought that's what marriage required. I supported Rachel's promotions, worked longer hours, handled everything at home, kept telling myself love meant sacrifice. Maybe sometimes it does, but eventually I realized I was the only one sacrificing. Claire looked at me for several seconds. You know what's strange? What? I don't feel judged talking to you. Most people immediately start giving advice. She smiled. Listen. Sometimes that's enough. She reached across the table and lightly touched my hand. A simple gesture. Nothing romantic. Yet somehow, it meant more than any kiss could have. Over the next few weeks, we kept meeting. Museums, coffee shops, historic neighborhoods, long walks through the city. Not once did we discuss revenge. Instead, we talked about rebuilding. Claire slowly rediscovered the woman she'd been before becoming David's wife. She started contacting old friends from the museum world. She met with young artists. She even began planning a small independent exhibition. Watching her come alive again was strangely satisfying. Not because it hurt David, because it healed her. One afternoon, she looked at me and laughed. I forgot what it felt like to wake up excited. You didn't forget. You were just surviving, she smiled. You always know exactly what to say. No, I've just been exactly where you are. Meanwhile, the divorce moved forward. Rachel barely contacted me anymore. Only lawyers, documents, property agreements, cold business transactions replacing 7 years of marriage. Then one afternoon, she surprised me. I heard you've been spending time with someone. I looked at her across the mediation table. I have. She studied my face. You seem happier, I shrugged. Maybe I finally remembered who I was. For the first time. Rachel looked uncertain, almost jealous. Funny how people only notice your value after they've already thrown it away. The beginning of the end. The ballroom grew noticeably quieter, not because the music had stopped, because people had started watching. David recovered first. He walked toward us wearing the polished smile of a man who believed he controlled every room he entered. Claire, he said warmly, kissing her cheek. You look incredible. She smiled politely.